Developing Tomorrow's Leaders is a podcast that is all about educating, supporting, and inspiring the next generation of leaders. Your host, Coach T, has over 35 years' experience of educating, supporting, inspiring, and enhancing the lives of many young men and women. Join Coach T and his village of inspiration.
Welcome to another episode of Developing Tomorrow's Leaders with your host, me, Antoine Thompson, or Coach T. And as you know, this podcast is all about just what the title says, Developing Tomorrow's Leaders. There's so many different ways that we can impact young people, preparing them for success through education, support, and inspiration. And my guest today is going to be talking about helping students discover self-awareness and confidence through academic success. She is the director and founder of Brigham Learning and Brigham Advising. She possesses a bachelor's degree from Middlebury College and a master's in educational administration from Columbia Teachers College. In addition to her degrees in advanced educational pursuits, she's also a certified divorce mediator. With consideration to the home environment for children, she helps parents accelerate resolution and peace in the divorce process. She aims to provide clarity on the new norm and of life balance beyond divorce, in addition to tactics to create boundaries and structure during a fraught time. I hope you all will help me welcome Kathleen Brigham to Developing Tomorrow's Leaders. How are you, Kathleen?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I also applaud you for the work that you do, because I know it is a very sensitive topic, and the impact it not only has on parents, but more importantly, what it has on kids. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and not just one business, but two. So obviously it shows your passion and love for what you do. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And it really comes from my experience. So I kind of created something out of what I felt a need for. So
yeah, and that's a great place to start, because I really love to find out, and for our audience to know really what got you into this and what really got you moving in this direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, to start with sort of the education slant, I'd always been in education. I took a lot of time off when my kids were little and kind of kept my foot in the door. And a way to do that was really doing a lot of private tutoring, but always had an interest in kind of broadening that. And for me, the focus is always about the student. So I was always fascinated with who they are, what was working in school, what wasn't, and really supporting them, getting to know themselves better. And so that grew. And after, really looking at a different business model that I needed, especially after going through a divorce, I scaled it. So now I have a huge team, and we all work mostly individually with students. And I think our focus is all the same, which is like helping them understand themselves and helping the parents understand who their children are in education as a learner. But I always say we're kind of half therapist, half teacher. You've got to combine these things to be effective. And then the other part of my business, the divorce part, really came when I was going through divorce. I couldn't find anybody to help me in the way that I wanted, which was just really talking a lot about my children. I had done a lot of research on how I wanted to go through it. And that was in a version called nesting. So that's when the kids stay in the home and the parents come and go. It was pretty radical 14 years ago. And long story short, I advise people specifically on that nesting experience, but also just their experience with their children going through divorce. So they sound like completely separate things, but I think you can imagine how much those two worlds come together. And also my approach overall with parents is really, let's focus on the children, what is needed and what's best for them. That's whether they're having trouble in school or the family's going through a separation or divorce. There's so many themes that get carried across both of those areas.
Yeah, so it's a couple things there. What I loved when you started was, recognizing what the kids need. And that's one of the things I know in the work that I do, that when I talk with kids, is there's never time taken to discover what it is what they're missing. It's always just the information you need. This is what you need. This is what you need. But it's like, hey, will you listen to what I need so that I can do better at this if you understand what I'm missing in that part of it. The second part was the latter part of what you shared is similar to what I do. I have a nonprofit, but also there are two entities within that. One is coaching and mentoring through sport, teaching life skills through sport, and then the other is teaching life skills without the athletic component. Again, being able to reach kids, in their area of interest, but also bridging the gap between, reality and, that fantasy world. So some kids want to have, like, for instance, kids that want to be NBA players. And it's like, hey, only 1% of kids that play actually make it to that. So what are you going to do when you don't have that? So I think the way you marry those two and knowing that there's impact for kids that are going through divorce and that nesting aspect of it, which for me, my mom divorced my biological father when I was so young. I didn't really experience any of that, so I wasn't impacted by it. But this kind of leads to a question I wanted to ask you, focusing on, because I really want to start with the impact you have with kids going through divorce, and being that you had the experience as well. What are a couple of things that you think people don't understand when they have to go through that, the impact that it has on kids? Because everybody knows, they always say, oh, it's going to affect the kids, but how?
Good question. So I have two sort of angles on that. One is there's this sort of disaster scenario, kids are going to be ruined and all that. And I just completely don't agree with that at all. It's a form of discomfort. It's uncomfortable. And I could even say that in some ways, our kids need to be feeling some discomfort. I'm not saying that everyone should be going through divorce, but I'm saying we're all going to encounter something uncomfortable. And I think in general, a lot of students can benefit from feeling discomfort. So if you are a parent going through divorce, don't buy into the story that you are damaging or ruining or breaking apart this family. I really don't like the term that a lot of people use, which is like coming from a broken home. It's not broken. It's just different. So that's one thing I really would want parents to think about, because it can be really hard on them and how they feel responsible for what's happening to the family. But I think for, just to go back to the child, what can be difficult for them is it's usually fairly new. It can be a new idea, and parents will say, well, we argue all the time and they should have, they probably knew it was coming. They don't. I will tell you, they don't. The world they're growing up in, the home they're growing up in, is just what they know. So the parents are often going through this. They're having their own troubles. It's kind of like Santa Claus. They know already that this doesn't really exist. They have this other reality. But when you deliver this to a child, it is all new and surprising to them. And you might just be surprised yourself as a parent, thinking, oh, I'm sure they're going to expect this. And so just thinking of that kind of delivery and how you speak to your children, keeping those two sides sort of in your brain, I think is really, really important, because both things are true. They're going to be okay, but this is going to be a really difficult experience for them.
Yeah. The first part of that is so important, because you talked about them being uncomfortable. You have to be uncomfortable to be comfortable. And divorce is as unpleasant as it may be for kids going through it. It's just like any other obstacle that they go through and that they're going to go through in life, is how you deal with it and how prepared are you for it, which is one of the things you're referring to with parents, keeping the kids informed of what's happening. So it's not totally a shock too, because and this is just me speaking, not having gone through it and knowing, but if I know, I see my parents arguing all the time, but if the parents are going, hey, we're having some issues, this is what it might be, or you try to protect kids, but you're really not protecting them if you're not informing them, if is basically what I'm saying. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah. And it's, again, you're not going to share every detail. I mean, I always say, this is the relationship. As I explained to my kids, I said, this separation is between your dad and I. This is not a separation of our family. Like, we are always going to be a family. But I think there's a real mix, and it depends on the age. And this goes back to education as well, the age of the child and the appropriate conversation to have with them. But I don't think it helps anybody to pretend that everything is okay and everything is attainable in academics. Everything's going to be fine or disastrous in our family. It's just letting them know, like, there are bumps, there are changes. We're going to keep communicating, and we're going to keep loving you, and we're going to figure this out. And it may look different than any of us wanted to, but that's just a different outcome. And we all have to learn that at some point in our lives. I mean, you don't get to be, mid 50s or whatever without something happening, right?
Yeah, and that's a great segue into, the impact that it has on them in the classroom is, because it's new, it's foreign to them. They're trying to adjust to the differences at home while still maintaining what's going on in school. And I can only imagine that is a conundrum that no child really wants to go through.
Yeah. And that's sort of where this nesting idea came from. If I thought, okay, I can at least leave them stable in the same home, right? They're not packing a bag and going to dad's or forgetting that special book or whatever that is, that might help them in school. Because even kids without divorce, we know these ages. I mean, they're thinking about the social or the game or the party this weekend, or, what happened in the lunchroom, or someone wasn't nice to them. I mean, all these things take up so much of the headspace. It's really hard for them to focus in school, as we all know, and really stay engaged.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you in relation to what you do with the Brigham advising aspect of it with school, because I want to really focus on focus on that next is specifics in how you approach working with kids.
Mm-hmm. So for kids, I really believe that we have to involve the parent. A lot of times we work in this silo, or, certainly schools work in a silo. Let's just support the child. And that makes sense. I mean, we have to figure out academically what they need and things like that. But as far as my advising work, I want both. I want to meet with the parents, really do. Anybody who is involved in Brigham learning and needs support in school has access to Brigham advising. So I meet with every single parent before they move into Brigham learning and get support in any way. So I want to talk to them about their child, their view. It's really helpful to hear about how they see their child. And some of them will be like, oh, he's so lazy, or, oh, he's brilliant, or, just whatever version that they have of their child is really important to understand. Obviously, most people come to me when they're having adversity, when things are not going well at home or at school. So, most of the conversation is about what's not working. And I really try to enter in the conversation. Well, what does work? What do they enjoy? Where do you see them shine? Really trying to draw out that there are always places where we can go and find that area of strength and work on that for the child. So that's the conversation I have with parents. And then I'll go back to the child. And what I really like to do, I love doing this, is sitting down with them and doing what I call a learning assessment. It's really casual. We just sit down and we talk. We talk about teachers. We talk about school. We talk about classes, homework, schedule, sleep, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And through that, and then some more formal questionnaires around executive function and their study habits, through that, I really get a picture of who they are as a person and as a student. And then I love putting those two things together and getting in there and saying, okay, this is where we're having trouble, but this is where you're really strong. So let's use that strength, to build up the weakness. It's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of great coaching and sports metaphors here, right? That I always say to students, like, you don't just go run a marathon. You have to train first. You don't just go shoot soccer, shoot on goal. You have to do all the other skills that are involved in soccer. And I really try to explain to them that there's so many facets of them that are so fantastic. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And I want them to feel okay about that, because most of them come in and are only highlighting the weaknesses.
Oh, I love that, Kathleen, because you just hit a home run, because I understood every aspect of that from every angle. Because when in coaching, that's exactly how I approach it in coaching is, it's not about what you don't do well, it's what you do well, because that's what you want to build on, because that's where you build the confidence from, because they're going to be more inclined to go be on board, because, they're not going to put up any walls, but they understand you're there to help. The other part I thought was really interesting too, is what I loved about it is the casual approach. I think you can connect with kids on a much deeper level if you don't come across as a professional, even though you are one, because they already know you're a professional. They know you're an adult, you're an authority figure, and then they're going to equate that to their parents, who are authority figures in their home, and they're going to know, okay, you're just like my parents, just not in my house. So having a different approach, I think, is important. And the other big part is you're a bridge just as I'm a bridge between the kids and the parents, and then also a bridge between the kids and school. And them realizing that, there are more than one authority figure that can help me, and different approaches are always good. But the other question I ask is, I get told this a lot, but I'll ask you, do you get a lot of parents that say, Kathleen, you say the same things that I say, but they don't listen to me, but they listen to you?
Mm-hmm. I was thinking as you were speaking, I was like, oh, this is what I want to say. So I have 3 children and I have 4 stepchildren. And I tell everybody I work with, I was like, if you think that I have sat down with any of my children and worked with them in an academic setting, no, 100% no, right? A lot of what I do, sort of one of my specialties, is in executive function, organization, helping a child with their study approach. And so I've joked with my kids all the time when they're sort of disorganized or whatever. I'm like, too bad you don't know anyone who's like a executive function specialist that could really help you out. And they're like, no, wait, Mom.
Oh, that's great.
And then often I feel like whatever that saying is, like a cobbler who's kids who have bad shoes or no shoes or something. I mean, what I do with other students, I don't always do with my own kids. It's just different. And I always say to parents, it's a different dynamic. You don't want to be that. You want to keep that parent-child relationship. You don't want to be the tutor, the nagger, all those different, roles. You just want to stay. I think the most important thing in parenting is like, you just want to stay open and connected.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And unlike you, my wife and I weren't able to have kids of our own, but I feel like I had a gift to be able to pack more kids. So that's kind of what I do. And I look at it similar to what you just said, is I feel like I'm that voice in their head sometimes that they wish they could have, but now they have it. But it's like that counselor. You get in that counselor mode and you just listen. You don't judge, but they get to share. And what they get to share is what they get to unload, that they can go back home, feel better about the situation that they're in, and maybe start building on that. And you just can provide that little input, that little inspiration and support that they need, but not infringing upon the parental responsibilities. And I think that's what's so important about what you do too, and is working with both the parents and the kids, because it is a community. We're a village of inspiration, and in order to be that, we all have to work together.
Mm-hmm. And I really want parents to feel more empowered and better about themselves, instead of, this is another thing I'm not doing well, and so I need, somebody to help my child with this. And that, even with some students who are really adverse to working one-on-one with me or one of my tutors, I often meet with parents and just do some coaching with them about what different things they can do at home, right? So a really quick example that might be useful just to illustrate what I'm talking about is this kind of nagging aspect. Like, I'm always asking them to do this. I'm always encouraging them to do this. And it's really frustrating to me. And one of the things I say is, make a list. Make a list. This is what I expect today. Maybe for the little kids, it's these chores or, whatever it is for you. Write it down, hand it over, head out. This repetition, kids will tune us out. They do tune parents out, right? So I think disengaging sometimes is really important. Keeping that expectation, right? That this is what we expect of you as a part of the family, but the repetition and the constant, I told you, that's when they just start to, completely tune parents out. So I'm like, make a list, leave it, head out.
Well, to me, that's where my approach is about, and like yours, is empowering kids to be responsible for their own success. In order to do that, you give them the tools, back off, let them build, or if they start building and it falls down, you go in and then you kind of fine tune the tools that you provide them to rebuild. So I love that approach, and I think you're right. It's you do it once or twice. How many times do I have to tell you? And they're kind of like, you don't have to tell me anymore. I heard you the first time, just not doing it. So right, and it just keeps going. But that family dynamic is so important. And I want to go back to something you alluded to, and I was like, I got to ask this because it's one of my biggest pet peeves of what I hear. It's all about the negativity of the next generation. It's, they're so entitled, they're so lazy. They're, when you mentioned that about an example, what parents say kids are lazy, whatever. But to me, I always come back with, well, what are you doing to be part of the solution? Because repeating that, all you're doing is basically allowing it to continue, and that's what kids hear. Oh, we're bad, and then they get defensive. When they get defensive, they act out, and that ultimately affects what happens in the classroom.
Exactly. I mean, the messages, right, that we tell them are so tough, especially post-pandemic, what we're telling them, oh my gosh, you are so behind in school, right? That's the big message. Like, we are behind academically. You guys have much higher rates of, depression and mental health. You're negative, all of these things. Now, there's a bit of truth in all of this, right? But to your point, what is the usefulness of just repeating that? I look at it more like, it's been a pretty rough couple of years. Okay, you guys, I get it. Like, that school was tough for all these different reasons, but we still have to, go down the road. So let's figure out how we're going to do that, right? Let's figure out what is, again, I always go back to, there's definitely something that's working, right? Sometimes it's outside of school and not in school at all, but there's always something that is working. And I want to find that nugget and build off of that.
Yeah. And speaking to that, with the pandemic and all, have you seen a shift to where it's becoming more streamlined for you to work with kids now that we're kind of on the, I would say, the back end, but we're out of the worst of it, if you will? Does it seem like some sense of normalcy in how you're working with them, or do you kind of still see like it's like hot pocket, cold pocket?
Yeah. And to our point of our conversation, I want to stay positive. I'm not seeing us even keeled yet. I think what I sort of explain to parents is, let's just accept that maybe we're all about a year behind, right? So that what you would have thought as sort of a typical 8th grader is more like a 7th grader. And to be honest, as an educator, this is probably not the politically correct thing to say, but I'm not even talking about academics. I don't really care about the academics. We're all going to get there. So we're behind in math, just, I don't know, we'll figure it out. I am much more concerned with sort of the social interactions, kids being less comfortable around adults, engaging less in class discussion, doing homework on screens. I would like that to go away. We used it in the pandemic, and I'm all for technology, but I would really like to see kids read a book, use a textbook, paper, and go back to that. I think these are things that would support them in their learning. But I would say overall, I'm seeing kind of they're less comfortable in an environment, either a classroom environment or a social environment.
And I got the perfect one for you. I've been actually doing a independent, unofficial social experiment. So when I'm out and about, you go to a fast food restaurant, a grocery store, department store, typically who's your cashier? It's typically a young person, right? It's a high school student or a college student. And I try to engage them in conversation and start with, hey, how are you? It takes everything I have to get a response, not just a verbal response, but even an expression. And I say that because it hurts, because by them, you not getting that response, they're hurting. There's something that's keeping them from being happy, and they're not happy. And when I do get some dialogue, I'm glad I'm having it, but it's not really overly positive. It's always something like, oh, I'm almost time to get off. And it's like, you have a job. You should love what you're doing. It's an opportunity to make money, save money, look at the positive aspects of having a job. But that's probably one of the biggest things that bothers me. And it's very unfortunate. So the work you're doing to be able to get kids to understand and to work on their social skills, as well as improving academically, is really important.
Yeah. And helping them understand that it all is connected, right? And that you have choice in the matter. Aren't we incredibly lucky to have these opportunities, whether you're graduating from high school and going and doing some work, or you want to pursue college, whatever it might be. What I try to talk to parents and students is that there are options. It's not about what job I get, what school I'm going to go to. We fixate on that as a country way too much. But I think the conversation would be like, what an opportunity. You're going to get to go on to maybe college or whatever you might be doing so that you can pursue what you're interested in. Like, that's an amazing thing. And you're going to have options. The college conversation is always so interesting. It's like, they always say, like, I don't know what school I'm going to get into. And I said, you're going to have some choices,
Right.
instead of saying, oh gosh, I hope I can do this, and I hope I can get this job, and I hope I can go to this school. How about I'm going to figure out what's going to work, what's going to be the best fit for me. And that's a hard conversation with parents, because I'm sure you feel this with sports. They insert themselves a lot, like, what kind of athlete would I want to be? What are the coaching that I would give my son? What school or job would I have? And I'm always trying to separate and say, well, we're talking about a different human being right now. We're not actually talking about a mini you,
Yeah, you're right. I'm going to ask you a question, but I just wanted to add something to what you just said. I actually have worked with kids that have been in those situations, and the great thing about that is, that what that parent's trying to do to that child, the way that they work with, and the way they have them work with all these different trainers, and taking away their childhood, making them do this and do that and do that. Although the kid loves the sport, but over time, we're going to lose the love of that sport because they're being forced to do something that they love to do instead of doing it because they love to do it. But this one young man, we have conversations away, and yeah, we're working, but we're not. We're having conversations, and I'm letting him share. And he's not overly verbal in his communication, but it's the few things he says that makes him feel comfortable. And for me, it's about reassuring him, hey, your parents just want the best for you. You be you through the process. Never lose who you are, because ultimately, if you do, then you're going to lose your love for it. You have too much talent. You have too much going for you, not just athletically, but academically, socially, and everything else. And he is just flourishing. He's now sophomore this year. I think he's flourishing. He's going to be one of the top players in this area, I think. But that's a kid that you get through to that understands it. But you worry about the kids on the other end of that spectrum who are impacted by their parents, and they take on that attitude, that demeanor that really sinks their opportunities because they're following that. And that leads to a question I wanted to ask you, if you want to add another comment to that. But I would love to hear one or two success stories. I always love to have people share the impacts of what they do, because at the end of this conversation, I'm sure there's going to be many people that want to reach out to you, and I want them to know why they're reaching out to you.
Well, that's a really fun question to answer. Even though you would look and see what my business is and think it's all like focused on getting straight A's or the academic part of it, really the favorite part for me is helping a child feel better about themselves academically, which obviously is going to carry them across in all things that they do. But a couple of specific examples I would give in this assessment that I do, and I do them on Zoom or, with students all over, in this informal conversation, we really get to some nuggets about, who they are and what's, like I said, what's working and what's not working, but also helping them understand why things aren't working. So for instance, we might talk about a specific teacher, and I'll say, well, why is that class so hard for you? Right. And they're like, I don't know. I just don't like that teacher. So, well, it's got to be more than that. Let's talk about more than that. Why? Well, one girl says to me, he's always walking around the classroom. It's so distracting. I don't understand it. He just walks around the classroom and talks the whole time. So in doing some other assessments and having conversations with her, what I realized is this is a child who is not very strong auditorily, right? Like taking in a lecture is really hard for her. She's also very easily distracted. So saying to her, you know why that class might be hard for you? Not just because you think the teacher is mean or you don't like them or something like that. And this is a middle school child when they sort of take things more personally. I said, but the way that you are being taught is really difficult for your brain, for the way that you take in information. First of all, walking around is very distracting because you're watching him walk around. Second of all, he's talking the whole time, and there's not a lot of support for you to see what's up on the board or, kind of get some visual or some other ways of learning, right? And that was such a moment for her, right? It was just like, oh my gosh, that's why this isn't clicking. It's not so much me. I mean, it's definitely the way my brain is working, but it makes sense to me now. So understanding that and then taking her through, okay, but we're not switching teachers and you're going to have other teachers that do this. Then having to understand, you got to open the book or the textbook and put it in front of you, or you need to put a piece of paper in front of you and take notes. And the greatest thing about this student, which was so much fun, is that she was a great artist. So I was like, I don't care, draw pictures, draw pictures of what he's talking about. It doesn't have to be all written word. And that engagement for her really helped things solidify in class. It really helped her not be as distracted and kind of understand what she needed to do to learn. But more importantly, she just understood herself so much better and felt so much better about herself. And her parents have called me. I stopped working with her over a year ago, but I still check in with the parents every year just to see how she's doing. And they said that assessment, like that piece of her understanding herself, was such a pivotal moment as she was also pivoting towards high school. So that's like one of those stories that I love, and I always keep up with my students anyways and see how they're doing.
Yeah, that's a great story, and it's about the connection and somebody listening to them and giving them a different perspective that connects with them. And a light bulb went off for her. And when you're describing it, I'm like, yeah, I would be distracted by the teacher walking, talking, and then stuff's on the board. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to listen to? Am I supposed to watch him? Am I supposed to listen to him? Am I supposed to look at the board? And giving her an opportunity to refocus on the way to learn. That's a great. I got goosebumps listening to that. But that's what's so important about the work that you do and your tutors and Brigham Learning and Brigham Advising is so important. I wanted to ask you, so what strategies do you suggest parents to build and maintain strong, positive relationships with their with their children? I mean, I have my own, but I always love to hear other people's perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just talk sort of from an academic standpoint, because homework is such a point of strife for families, getting kids to sit down and do all that sort of stuff. So I think ideally early on is really good to set that structure. One of the things I like to suggest to parents is that they have a dedicated study time. And it might change, as you know, with sports schedules, like it might not be 5 o'clock every night because of practice and things like that. But having that, and maybe in elementary school, it's a half an hour, maybe middle school, it's an hour, and even in high school, I think a dedicated time is really important. And what I mean by that is there's a difference between a child coming home, rushing through their work, always thinking, oh, if I had less work, I'll be done, right? And so they see the kind of homework and what they have to do at home as a huge negative. It's getting in the way of everything else that I want to do, right? And then it becomes a battle with the parent. But if the parent set up like, this is study time, you're going to sit there for a half an hour, and if you finish early, clean out your notebook or look ahead for next week, maybe get some reading done, so that they know I'm going to be here for this amount of time. Then it becomes, oh, this is in my daily practice. This isn't me as a punishment having to sit here and doing homework. And I mean, it's a very specific example I'm giving you, but the reason I'm giving it to you is because most of the conversations I have with parents at home is about the strife of getting their child to sit down and do the work. And then once they do it, maybe they rush or they complain or they, whip off a quick assignment. I think students really need to get better and more comfortable at sitting for a certain amount of time. I think we're very easily distracted these days. That way, parents, whether they're working or they're home, there's this dedicated time. And it's, again, I'm not saying that this is the golden rule, and I'm not saying as you get older with high schoolers, this doesn't get more difficult, but it's an expectation I think that you can set. I think that's sort of a more practical example. I think the other thing that I try to work on with parents is just really understanding that their child is an individual, and what may work for the parent doesn't always work for the child. So you want them to be organized in a certain way or get a certain grade. You really have to back off and say what is going to work for them, right? I have students this is a funny example, who always get planners, right, from school and from their parents. Oh, we've got this perfect planner, and you fill it all out and you'll be all organized. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to use it. All right. Do they want to use a piece of paper? Do they want to use sticky notes? Do they want to use their phone? Do they want to use a whiteboard? I don't care. I just want them to think about what they have in front of them, right? They have to think about the work, but also their day, right? They might have to get to their sports schedule, their play rehearsal. This is planning for life, right? This is planning how they approach things. And I really strongly believe that how we approach things is so important to how we go out into the world. So if you're approaching homework like, I'm going to sit down, complain, get this done as fast as I can, or, well, I got a half an hour to sit here, I might as well make the best of it. It's a shift. It's a different approach in how we think about it.
Yeah. So I know that this may be funny to some, but yeah, I see so many videos and stuff where parents are like, well, I can have my kid do their homework and I can check it. Well, half the stuff they teach now, nobody knows how to do, or they wouldn't know how to check it. But it's like that checks and balance. It's for the sole purpose of just going, hey, I'm reinforcing that we have the study time. Hey, I want to see your homework after. You don't necessarily have to know what it is, but it's a whole that second layer of accountability, if you will. Would that be another suggestion?
Yeah, I think that's a good bookmark to what I suggested, that you do get to look at it. Parents, it's funny really interesting to me how many parents say, oh, he gets so mad at me when I ask to see something. I'm sort of like, yeah, you know what? Until they're up and out and supporting themselves, you get to ask for things. You get to check, and again, it's a balance. If you're checking it for an A, and a perfect score, a perfectly done homework, that's such a different approach than like, I just want to see that you did it. I just want to see that we're on a same page. I mean, the other approach that I suggest to parents who are dealing with students who are already like really having a hard time, and that might be not that they're not capable, it's just that they're not handing in their work, they're not motivated, is to say, until you improve, until you show me something different, this is the thing. This is what we're going to do. And I call it the 5-minute check-in. You're going to check in with me for 5 minutes a day. I'm going to look on the school portal with you. I'm going to see what your responsibilities are. I'm going to look at what's handed in. And, we're going to do that every day. And a lot of, certainly you can imagine older students get really angry about that. They feel like you're taking over, you're not giving them independence. But you earn your independence, right? If you're not getting, it's not about the grade that you're getting. It's more about if you're not showing up to class, showing up to school. If you're not getting the grade that you're capable of, I don't mean getting an A, I mean getting the grade you're capable of. So you might get a B, and that's fantastic. Then there has to be, to your point, some accountability. So I think that 5-minute check-in, I call it the non-negotiable. This is what we're doing every day.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that part is about the effort that the child puts in. It's either you put in the effort just to say you did it, or you put in the best that you can. And like you said, it's not about getting the A, it's how you're putting your best foot forward to do the work. And, if you're consistently not getting the grade that you want, then you can kind of dig a little deeper, get the assistance, like going to you to get the advising and whatever additional academic assistance that they may need. But I like those strategies. I like it because it keeps the parents involved in the process. And you're right, kids have to earn that independence, and a lot. I know that some of the kids I work, parents are giving up too much of that too soon. And once you give it up too soon, it's hard to get it back because you've given up that power. And then we try to get it back, and all you're doing is battling your child. And at that point, it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. And just to counter that from what the parents are doing, be careful, right? Be careful. If you're setting it up for perfection, if every time you say to your child, let me see your paper, oh gosh, well, I would have maybe done it differently, or maybe you should go back and edit that, or how did you only get 70 out of 80 on the math, quiz? Understand that then you are closing a door to their being open with you, right? So now they're going to be very self-conscious about showing you anything. So there's accountability, but then if you're placing your expectations on them, that's not a very good setup either.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it's almost like the kids are going to be cringe worthy when your parents come in, they're going to be looking over and, hey, I'd rather them go, okay, you did that. Okay, good job. Guess what you've done? By doing that, you're going, hey, you're proud of them. And you tell them. I always tell kids, tell parents, praise the actions you want repeated. And tell kids, repeat the actions you want to be praised for. And that's what that is.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, let the school do their job, right? Let the teacher tell them they should, edit or work, study a little bit more for the math quiz or whatever. I also always say, like, don't, rush or bring their homework to school, or don't save them too much. Like, they have to feel a little of that discomfort or that panic, like, oh my gosh, I didn't do a very good job, or I didn't study enough, or I left that homework at home, because that's how they learn. And if they make those mistakes early on, like elementary and middle school, who cares? Honestly, nothing matters then. It's when if we do so much saving early on, and then in high school, when things sort of supposedly matter a lot more, then nobody wants to make a mistake. They're not going to have that experience of, oh, I remember what it was like to show up unprepared for a test, or I remember what it was like to leave that homework at home, or something like that. I mean, going back to our initial conversation, they have to feel some discomfort. They have to learn from that. I strongly believe.
Yeah, I think the unsaid thing in through all this is, by doing these last few strategies, is that you're allowing your child to be able to come to you for help if they're struggling, if you're not being too forceful and too what's the word I'm looking for, too strict with that process. If they're struggling and the teachers may not be able to give them what they need, like the example you gave with the young lady figuring out how she learns, and if they're having trouble, and if you're checking, it's like, oh, you're consistently going, is there anything I can help you with? As opposed to, well, I think I would have done it this way. Now they may be more inclined to go, hey, mom, dad, could you help me with what I'm having trouble with? Now guess what? You're working together. You're also helping build that personal relationship with your child too, and that trust factor and that mutual respect between each other.
Yeah. I think as parents and adults in general, we often don't share what we're not good at, right? And I love explaining to students, and they always sort of like, oh, I never thought of it that way. But I say to them, so let's just look at kindergarten through high school, right? K through 12. Your day is planned every day. You are going from one class to another. You're supposed to be, a historian, a scientist, a mathematician, a linguist. Like, you're supposed to be good at all of these things, and you're supposed to do it all day long. And then you go home, and you usually have a pretty full afternoon of, other activities. And then you go to bed, and then you rinse and repeat, and you basically rinse and repeat that for like 12 years, right?
Yeah.
So number one, look at your parents. What are they doing? Are they doing all those skills every day? No, they have narrowed down into a specialty that they're really good at, right? So they don't always look like they're making mistakes, because they've already had all that, and they've narrowed it down to their very specific job, specialty, whatever that might be. And number two, 12th grade, that ends. You've got a whole life ahead of you, whether it's a job or college or whatever you're extending to do. You're going to probably go into something that you're interested or specialize in. You're not going to be doing math if you don't like math when you're, 30. So helping them get some perspective that this is a pretty hefty lift, right? A lot of demands on them in their school day, and also what we're asking them to be, right? We're sort of asking them to be an expert in pretty much every area.
Yeah, no, and I love that. No, that's a great way of explaining that. And when you look at that big picture, like, holy crap, I guess I got to get focused. The sooner I get focused, the better I'm going to do. And you get my mindset, this is what it's going to be day in and day out, day in, day out. And yeah, I can tell you, I mean, I wish somebody told me that years ago. And, I was never very good at math, but guess what I ended up doing for 20 years? A lot of what I did had to do with math. And I'm going, I should have paid more attention to that freaking class. But you know what? You got better at it. Yeah, you learned, and I had to focus later. But the funny thing was, I hope nobody takes away, I got it faster, mature, and learned how I learned and applied. But to your point, if we set that foundation early and the expectations early, the results will come sooner and more consistently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have to remember, we are always looking forward as adults. Like, we plan, that's kind of what we do. For most students, like certainly elementary through middle school, you're thinking about maybe tomorrow at best.
Yeah.
Your brain is focused on what is in front of you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kathleen, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I probably could talk to you for another hour, but there's a couple of other things that I want to make sure we touch on. One, I wanted to ask if there was anything in your short-term or long-term future that you're working on with Brigham Learning and Brigham Advising that you want to share with us.
Oh, it's a good question. So Really more around Brigham advising, working more around a book that my husband and I wrote about nesting. So that's been sort of something that we finished and really proud of. And so I've been doing more work around that and more podcasts around that, which is really, really interesting. As far as the Brigham learning goes, we're sort of, really sort of made this realization that I'm kind of at where I want to be with it, because my main focus is I want to be able to spend the time I need with each and every family. So it's really just getting better at what we're doing, and really giving more access to parents. So we're planning some good webinars. These are all free events around sort of 2 or 3 different themes around what we're seeing in schools right now. And those will be coming around late August into the fall. And I'm really excited about planning those. And I'm planning them with my colleagues, with the tutors I work with, because they are experts in their field. I mean, letting them speak is really the best education. So I'll be collaborating with them, and I always love doing that.
Yeah, so that's a question I forgot to ask in the very beginning, because you said you have 3 kids of your own and you have 4 stepchildren. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, freaking Brady Bunch plus 1 over there. How do you do all that with 7 kids?
Well, they're adults. Thank God they're adults now for the most part. The youngest is 17. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I think the main thing is you just got to realize that you have 7 individuals and each one is different, and you just have to kind of, it's almost like you're sort of hovering, and you sort of go in when you need to, and then you back out, and then you go in with another, but there's always something going on, and there's usually 1 or 2 of them around.
Yeah. Well, I always ask that question because it touches to the level of compassion and love you have for what you do, because 7 kids, whether adults or not, they're still yours.
Mhm.
And to dedicate the time, energy, and effort to what you do is to be commended. So I do applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
My other is, as you scrolling across the screen for those that are watching, is how they can get in touch with you. I do have your website and email, but you want to elaborate on the other ways of contacting, feel free.
Yeah, no, those are great ways. And both, like if you get on the website, I give free consult to anybody. So you can always just sign up there and we'll chat for a little while and, just see what's going on with your child or your situation. And then the other is I try to make it a really useful Instagram, and it's you just put a the in front of my name, at the Kathleen Brigham. Because there's another Kathleen Brigham, but on there I try to obviously put the podcast and things like that, but I try to put information for parents that's just something that's useful to them. There's some good takeaways that, whether it be about the college process or how you're going to approach, summer, whatever it might be. So that's I think some really helpful information for parents.
All right, so first thing I'm doing when I get off this is I'm getting, and then when message that other Kathleen Brigham and tell her to stop fronting.
That would be really helpful.
Tell her to delete her account, because there's only one Kathleen Brigham, and I'm talking to the Kathleen Brigham. So yeah, I got you. I'll take care of that for you.
Thank you.
My last question for you, I ask all my guests, and it's no right or wrong answer, but share with us the individual or individuals that have been most influential in your life and why.
Oh, that's such a good question. I love this question because when I talk to students about it, I love when it's one of those great teachers, I mean, really the biggest influences in my life would be an early elementary school teacher, kindergarten, first grade. That would be one of them. My parents are pretty great influences on me. And then I'm really lucky to have a few mentors in my life that have really taught me to be open and compassionate and really help me be honestly a better human being. Yeah.
No, that's great. It's great. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just one of those things I like to ask, because we're all influenced by so many different people. And I just think it's a great way to share with people that you can be impacted by so many different people, both inside your family and outside. Mm-hmm. So really appreciate that. So before we go, I wanted to share that I also co-host another podcast called Teens Speak, Empowering Today's Youth. It's a podcast for teens, about teens, and starring teens. I host this with my good friend Keith Senzer, who is a youth leadership and empowerment coach in New York, actually. And he and I get on, and we talk to middle school, high school, and college students. We've actually had a fourth grader on as well. And so what's great about this podcast is these kids come on and they reach out to us to be on this podcast, and they talk about the challenges and struggles that they've gone through, but more importantly, the strategies that they've used to overcome those challenges and struggles. And it's an opportunity for them to share. For kids that may not feel as though they have a voice, they do indeed have a voice. So if you'd like to be a guest, or you know someone that would be a great guest for us, Keith and I both have a form on our websites. Mine is CoachT'sCorner.com, and Keith's is ShiftYourPower.com. We'd love to have you, because we are developing tomorrow's leaders, helping teens find their true north through education, support, and inspiration. So Kathleen, again, I thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, expertise, and for what you're doing for the next generation of leaders. And I wish you nothing but continued success.
Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation, and I just really admire the work that you do. Thank you.
Well, oh, my pleasure. And you mentioned your book, so we definitely have to have you back on when you and your husband finish that book and you want to go on a book tour. I would love to have you make us one of your stops.
Okay. You got a date.
Awesome. Sounds great. As always, I'm Coach T, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Developing Tomorrow's Leaders, where we're here to educate, support, and inspire and empower the next generation of leaders. Until next episode, take care.
Thank you.
Preteens and teens face many challenges that can and will affect their futures. They need a village of supporters that can guide, direct, and lead them on that path to success. If you have a preteen or teen that is in need of guidance and direction in their personal growth and development and/or personal relationship development, Coach T is the one that can make it happen. You can get more information on his website, CoachT'sCorner.com.